So welcome back to Market Minutes, everybody. We're wrapping up 2025 and gearing up for 2026. So if you're new, thanks for joining us. Today I'm joined by Max Goyzman, Vice President of Financing here at Peakhill Capital. Max has been here since the early days. He's completed well over $2 billion of transactions, specifically the CMHC space, operating coast to coast. Thank you for being here, Max. Happy to have you join us for this end-of-year wrap-up and outlook for 2026.
I'm always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
2025, I think most people would say that the Canadian economy has been a little bit sluggish. I think in general, there's a lot of negativity and skepticism around the strength of the Canadian economy. How have people been responding to the sluggish economy?
Yeah, well, I'd say one of the biggest de facto lenders through an insurance company is CMHC. And we were concerned like a year and a half, 2 years ago, that they would turn off the taps, and they kind of warned us that they were going to tighten up. But what they really did was they took really, really aggressive programs and made them slightly less aggressive. And then most recently, over the past couple of months at the apartment conference in Toronto in September, the CEO of CMHC mentioned that the programs are going to continue, like they're not going away. Yes, they might be changed in response to declining rents, more supply coming online, lower immigration, which is pushing rents down, but they're not going away. And what we've seen after COVID, where we thought all the banks would shut down, is that they really haven't. New clients looking for new lenders are able to find new lenders. It's not a case of where banks are just dealing with their only existing clients, and some other borrowers that might not have deep banking relationships won't be able to get banked. That's not the case. So we're seeing like pretty dynamic market still. We don't really have many losses at all. Maybe land speculators might have, a different opinion, and certain condo sectors in some of the major markets could be challenged. But overall, like the economy and certain asset classes like multifamily, industrial, retail, everything aside from condo is still looking pretty strong. But again, you have to kind of dive into the regional specifics.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next question. So given what you mentioned about declining rents, declining immigration, are there certain markets that we're seeing are still where those asset classes, multifamily, industrial, retail, are doing very well? And are there certain markets where we're seeing not doing as well?
Yeah. So we can go market by market, but
we can go as specific as you like, but we're at the most expertise.
Sure. Like one big trend that we're seeing is the difference between major condo markets like Vancouver and Toronto, and then the rest of the country. So you have Toronto and Vancouver, where a lot of money was put into condo projects, and now that money is frozen, and it's hard to get a lot of transaction activity in those markets because all that money is tied up. And then the rest of the markets like Montreal, the Prairies, Atlantic Canada, they're all apartment markets, and they've all done really, really well in terms of continued construction, increasing rents, and they haven't had the same condo boom. So they're more steady markets. Like those steady markets, now that there's a risk of oversupply in some of them, so you have to be careful in those micro markets, like regionally, where you have a lot of supply. But I think those are still really good, strong markets. Like Montreal, we've seen has been super resilient over the last 5 years.
Something I read some time ago is that over the last number of years, where we're saying, closer to 1 million immigrants coming in, 3 out of every 5 were coming into Ontario. And yet we're still seeing that some of those issues are impacting us here in Toronto. Maybe speak to the construction deals that we're seeing now. Are those, is that as a result of a lot of that immigration? Is that happening here in Ontario? Is that happening in other provinces where they have an undersupply?
Yeah, so the majority of those transactions have been in the non-condo markets, like I mentioned, like Atlantic Canada, Montreal, the Prairies, and parts of BC. Those deals are continuing to do well. They're a little bit stretched, but I think what we saw as part of Carney's campaign was that he wanted to eliminate taxes in some of those condo markets that have really, really high taxes, like Toronto, for example. in development charges. Part of his mandate was to eliminate them or reduce them to the extent that new rental construction would be feasible or viable as projects. And so we're still waiting for that. But the general trend is that the government is willing to provide the private sector with the relief that they need. And it's happening. It's just happening slowly. And then in those non-condo markets where we've had low taxes, it's just the free market that's playing out. So a lot of new construction, supply is increasing. We'll see how that impacts the market dynamics over time. But so far they're okay. You just have to know how to underwrite your deal. If you're dealing with instead of a 2% vacancy, it's 5%, right?
It's interesting. It's interesting that, historically people would have looked at like Ontario and BC as being, the stable provinces. And you're seeing that, there's a lot more opportunities being found in some of the, the smaller provinces.
It's more like a pendulum, I'd say. Like a pendulum will swing to the major markets. If there's a recession, all the jobs are here, right? So at some point, people are going to want to come back and we're going to have to house them and get more construction here on the purpose-built rental side or whatever it is, industrial, retail. Just more transactions are going to happen because the government is going to push it there. But the pendulum swung the other way for a while to those other markets.
Okay. So speaking of that pendulum swinging, what's your outlook heading into 2026? Is it going to be, the economy's still kind of sluggish? We're going to see more of what we see in 2025? Or do you see some of that swing coming back?
So we saw, especially in major markets, like I said, where I'm in Toronto, Vancouver as well. That's the markets that really attract all the capital on a large scale, institutional scale. So we've seen a freeze on transactions over the last couple of years. But ultimately, like all these players, whether it's an institution or a family office, they're going to have to trade someday. It's a fund that's liquidating. It's a family that's undergoing a restructuring. And so we're seeing cap rates stabilize, sellers slowly coming to terms with the fact that they're not getting the same cap rate that we were discussing during COVID when rates were near zero. And so we're already seeing that. So we think that transaction activity is going to pick up, that we've seen the bottom in 2026, going into 2027 as well, as these transactions just need to happen. And in order for that to happen, you need to have a buyer that's willing to put the money out, right? And has to convince an investment committee or whoever else it is that it's a viable deal. So I think it's positive. I do.
Do you see, I know that we're not focused on the condo space, but as you mentioned earlier, the condo, the challenges the condo space has had in Ontario and BC has really frozen a lot of liquidity. Do you see any of that changing in 2026?
Yeah, I think again, it's just cap rates coming up, and then certain groups needing to transact because you can't just hold an asset forever. Like something's got to give, and you can put it off, but at some point, these assets are going to have to move. So.
Even at a loss.
We're seeing it now. Like we're seeing cap rates creep up, and not necessarily a loss, but
a piece of land or a project that's half finished. Like, if the value isn't there anymore, what's the people going to have their keys back? Walk away from the note. Like
on condo sites specifically.
Yeah.
We'll see. That part could be less rosy. Yeah.
All right, that's a fair. I think that's a good take on 2026.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.